Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dream Stories, where fictional stories are made for you, my listeners, so sit back, relax, and listen. Thank you. Today's dream story is The Fisherman and the Hidden Sea. Let us begin. Episode 1. The ocean had always been full of secrets. For generations, the small coastal village of Marrow Bay had survived because of the endless waters that surrounded it. The sea provided fish, shells, pearls, and stories passed down from one fisherman to another. Some stories were about storms that appeared from nowhere. Some were about ships that vanished beyond the horizon. And some were about things that lived beneath the waves. But those stories were usually dismissed as the imagination of sailors who had spent too many days alone at sea. Seymour had never been one for those stories. He was a fisherman, not a storyteller. Every morning before the sun fully rose, Seymour would wake, prepare his equipment, and walk toward the shoreline with the same quiet determination he had carried for most of his life. He was not the richest fisherman in Marrow Bay. He did not own the largest boat. He did not discover the rarest treasures. But Seymour was patient. And patience was something the ocean respected. That was why, when the village needed someone to search deeper waters for clams and pearls, Seymour was often the first person they called. The work was difficult. The deeper he went, the colder the water became. The sunlight above slowly faded into a blue darkness, where only the sound of his own breathing followed him. But Seymour enjoyed the silence. Underneath the waves, away from the noise of the village, he felt as though he was visiting another world. A world untouched by human hands. A world that still held mysteries. On that particular morning, Seymour descended farther than usual. His eyes searched the ocean floor, looking between rocks and patches of sea plants for clams hidden beneath the sand. After several minutes, he spotted one. A large clam resting near a cluster of stones. Seymour carefully moved toward it. But before he reached down, something moved. Not the clam. Not the sea plants. Something else. Seymour froze. At first, he thought it was simply a strange current moving through the water. But then he noticed something impossible. A transparent substance was drifting toward him. It was not water. It was not smoke. It was not any creature Seymour had ever seen. The strange figure moved slowly, almost carefully. It flowed through the ocean like a living ribbon of glass. Yet somehow, it had a shape, a body, a presence. Seymour watched as the mysterious being circled around him. Not aggressively, not like a predator searching for its next meal. Instead, it seemed curious, almost like it was studying him. Seymour narrowed his eyes behind his diving mask. "What are you?" he whispered. Of course, the ocean gave no answer. The creature continued moving around him, changing its shape slightly as it drifted through the water. Seymour's heart raced. He had spent decades beneath the sea. He had seen strange fish, rare plants, unusual formations hidden beneath the waves. But never anything like this. Slowly, Seymour moved his hand away from the creature. He had no desire to touch it. Not because he hated it, but because he respected it. Whatever this being was, it was alive. And the last thing Seymour wanted was to hurt something he did not understand. So he carefully returned his attention to his work. He collected the clams nearby and kept a respectful distance from the mysterious creature. After a few minutes, the transparent being slowly drifted away. Not swimming, not disappearing, simply moving deeper into the ocean until it vanished into the blue. Seymour watched the empty water for several moments. Then he shook his head. Impossible. But even as he said the words, he knew what he had seen. Something had been there. Something real. After finishing his search, Seymour returned to the surface. He removed his diving equipment, loaded his findings, and walked toward the village market. Like every other day, the villagers gathered to trade, sell, and share news. Seymour placed his clams on the table. The usual customers arrived. The usual conversations filled the air. The usual sounds of village life continued. But Seymour remained quiet, because his mind was not on the market. It was beneath the waves. That night, Seymour barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the transparent creature moving around him. The way it watched him, the way it moved, the way it seemed almost friendly. The next morning, Seymour convinced himself it had been a strange encounter. Nothing more. The ocean was large. The world was full of things humans did not understand. Perhaps he had simply discovered one of them. So he did what he always did. He ate breakfast, prepared his equipment, and returned to the sea. But the moment Seymour reached the same area underwater, the mysterious creature appeared again. This time, it was carrying something. A clam. Seymour stared. The creature slowly approached. The clam floated gently in front of him. For a moment, Seymour did not move. Was this a gift? A trade? A message? He carefully reached forward. Not toward the creature, but toward the clam. The moment he accepted it, the transparent being moved backward. Then something unexpected happened. It began to spin. Slowly at first, then faster, moving left, then right, twisting through the water in a beautiful zigzag pattern. It looked almost like a dance. Seymour watched in amazement. The creature continued its strange underwater performance before swimming away. And Seymour realized something. The creature had not been afraid of him. It had not attacked him. It had not tried to hide. It had chosen to approach him. The fisherman looked down at the clam in his hand. Inside was a pearl unlike any he had ever seen. It shimmered with colors he could not explain. Blue, silver, and a faint glow that seemed to shift whenever he moved it. Seymour returned to the village that day with more questions than answers. And for the first time in his life, the ocean did not feel empty. It felt alive. The following morning, Seymour returned once again. But this time, he was not alone. Two transparent creatures waited beneath the waves, and both carried gifts. Larger clams, rarer pearls, and a secret that would soon change Seymour's life forever. Because by the 10th day, the ocean would reveal that these creatures were not merely visitors. They were guardians. And Seymour had unknowingly become the first human they had trusted in hundreds of years. The ocean had always been a place of mystery. But now, for Seymour, it had become something more. It was no longer just a place where he searched for clams and pearls. It was a place where something impossible had found him. Something alive. Something that seemed to understand him. For years, Seymour had believed that humans knew more about the world than they actually did. They mapped the land, built villages, sailed across oceans, and studied the creatures that lived around them. But beneath the waves, there were still secrets waiting. And Seymour had discovered one of them. The morning after his second encounter, Seymour sat quietly at his small kitchen table, staring at the strange pearl he had collected. It rested in the center of his palm. Even in the dim morning light, it seemed different from ordinary pearls. Most pearls reflected the world around them. This one seemed almost as if it held a world of its own. A faint shimmer moved across its surface whenever Seymour tilted it. He had seen hundreds of pearls throughout his life. He had sold many of them, but he had never seen anything like this. This came from that creature, Seymour whispered. He carefully placed the pearl into a small wooden box. Then he prepared for another day beneath the waves. A part of him wondered if the creature would return. Another part of him wondered if yesterday had been a one-time event. Perhaps the ocean had simply shown him something unusual. Perhaps he had imagined the kindness behind the creature's actions. But deep down, Seymour hoped he would see it again. When he reached the ocean, he entered the water and slowly descended. The familiar sounds of the surface faded away. The voices of the village disappeared. The crashing waves above became nothing more than a distant memory. Once again, Seymour found himself surrounded by the peaceful silence of the deep. He searched along the ocean floor, collecting clams as he normally did. But every few moments, he looked around, waiting, watching, wondering. Then suddenly, a soft movement caught his attention. Seymour turned, and there it was, the transparent creature. But this time, it was not alone. Another creature drifted beside it. Seymour stopped moving. There were two of them. The creatures moved gracefully through the water, their bodies shifting like living glass. They were similar, yet somehow different. One moved slightly faster than the other. The second seemed calmer, staying close behind. Seymour watched as they approached. Neither seemed afraid. Neither seemed threatened. Instead, they carried something. 2 clams, and these clams were larger than the one from the previous day. Seymour's eyes widened. He had spent his entire life searching for valuable shells. He knew what made a clam rare. He knew what made a pearl valuable. But these were unlike anything he had ever found. The creatures stopped in front of him. The clams floated gently between them. Seymour slowly reached out. "Are these for me?" he asked. The question was impossible. He knew they could not answer. Yet somehow, he felt as though they understood. Carefully, Seymour accepted the clams. The moment he did, the creatures moved away. Then they began their strange dance. Just like before, they moved in zigzagging patterns, spinning, twisting, gliding through the water. The 2 creatures moved together like they had practiced the same dance for years. Seymour watched in amazement. There was no fear, no aggression, only joy. For several moments, the fisherman forgot about his work, forgot about the village, forgot about selling clams. He simply watched. 2 mysterious beings from beneath the ocean, celebrating something only they understood. When the dance ended, the creatures slowly disappeared into the blue. Seymour remained still. Then he looked down at the clams they had given him. Inside were pearls, larger than the first, brighter, more beautiful. But Seymour was not thinking about their value. He was thinking about the creatures. Why had they chosen him? Why did they trust him? And how many more of them were hiding beneath the waves? That evening, Seymour returned to the village. But this time, he did not go directly to the market. He went home. He placed the pearls carefully on his table. Then he sat there for a long time. The village was quiet. The sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon. And Seymour knew something had changed. He could not continue pretending nothing had happened. The next morning, instead of heading straight to sell his findings, Seymour walked through the village. He approached his neighbors, the fishermen, the merchants, the elders, everyone who had spent their lives near the ocean. "I saw something beneath the water," Seymour said. The villagers looked at him curiously. Something about his voice made them listen. "I found creatures living beneath the waves." A few people smiled. Others exchanged uncertain looks. "Caught a strange fish, did you?" one fisherman joked. Seymour shook his head. "No." He reached into his bag and revealed the pearls. The laughter stopped. Everyone looked closer. The pearls were unlike anything they had seen. Some villagers stepped forward. "Where did you find these?" Seymour hesitated. From the creatures, the silence that followed was heavy. Then someone laughed. Not cruelly, almost nervously. "Seymour, you've been spending too much time underwater." The others nodded. They admired the pearls. They wondered where they came from. But they did not believe his story. And Seymour understood why. If someone had told him the same thing a week ago, he probably would have doubted them too. So he returned home. But he did not give up. Because the next day, he returned to the ocean. And the creatures were waiting. 1 became 2. 2 became 3. And every day, more appeared, each carrying gifts, each performing their beautiful underwater dance. Until one morning, Seymour descended beneath the waves and stopped in disbelief. The ocean around him was filled with movement. Transparent figures drifted through the water. 1, 2, 5, 10, A group of creatures surrounded him, not threatening him, welcoming him. Seymour looked around in amazement. He had spent his entire life searching the ocean for treasures. But he realized something. The greatest treasure he had ever found was not something he could sell. It was something he needed to protect. Still, Seymour had one problem. No one believed him, and he needed a way to prove the creatures existed. So he came up with an idea. If the world would not believe his words, maybe they would believe their own eyes. The next morning, Seymour returned to the ocean carrying something new. A small camera. He carefully positioned himself. He waited and waited. The creatures appeared. They moved around him. They danced. They played. They interacted with one another. Seymour smiled. This time, everyone will see you. He lifted the camera, pressed the button, and waited. But when he looked at the recording, his smile disappeared. The screen showed only empty water. No creatures. No movement. Nothing. Seymour tried again. And again. Every recording showed the same thing. Empty ocean. As if the creatures had never existed. Seymour looked back into the water. The transparent beings floated around him, watching, waiting, almost as if they knew exactly what had happened. And then Seymour realized, maybe the creatures were not invisible. Maybe they were simply not meant to be discovered by everyone. Not yet. But Seymour had another idea. If cameras could not introduce the world to these creatures, maybe he could. Not through recordings, not through pictures, but through experience. And that was when Seymour began thinking about something no fisherman had ever done before. A new kind of business. A journey beneath the waves. A chance for people to meet the hidden creatures of the sea. With their own eyes. But before Seymour could share the ocean's greatest secret, he needed to answer one question. Would the creatures trust anyone else? Or was Seymour the only human they would ever accept? This concludes episode 1. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe to tune back in next week, where more stories and continuations will be added. Remember, every story begins with a dream and grows from an imagination. Dream beautifully, everyone.